Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to our third session, looking at parenting through a pandemic and looking at how you can help your children play, have fun, but also become physically literate, as we talked about last week, and also having an understanding of how important movement actually is. So up to now, we've looked at the importance of movement, and we talked about having a strong core and strong shoulder muscles. And then last week, we started looking at what does it actually mean to be physically literate? And we talked about not only the physical skills, but also about children having the confidence and the motivation. And really, if they don't get a lot of practice, they aren't going to be confident. It's like riding a bike. You know, how long it takes you to get children to be able to ride bikes and running along behind them, holding onto their seats. And then all of a sudden they start to get away with it. But if you don't keep that up and keep practicing with them, the next time you go out, if you leave a few weeks between it, it's almost like starting all over again. On the subject of riding bikes, some of you may have seen balance bikes, which are small bikes without pedals. And they're actually fantastic for children learning to ride a bike. And I know lots of parents think, but it hasn't got pedals, how are they going to learn? But a lot of children, when we talked about stability and physical literacy, actually learn the stability from being on a balance bike and moving along, learning to get to the stage where they can push themselves and lift their feet off, and they can travel along straight without putting their feet down. They've got a huge amount of stability from doing that. And often they can then transfer from a balance bike straight to a bike with pedals without using stabilizers. So it's something to think about if you are thinking about bikes and teaching your children how to learn to ride a bike. Often a balance bike is a better starting point than a bike with stabilizers. It just helps them with that stability. So last week we looked at stability and we looked at locomotion. So we looked at ways of balancing, ways of challenging balance by closing our eyes or doing something for longer. And then locomotion, lots of different ways of moving. And I hope you've had a chance to have a look at the handouts from last week, and maybe you have even had the chance to try them out with your children. So today we're going to have a look at object control. And object control is probably one of the hardest aspects of physical literacy, because it takes children quite a long time to learn how to develop control over their own bodies without us actually asking them to then start using an object. So where we go with object control is always from the basis of getting their body in the right place at the right time, because being able to control an object, we need to be able to watch where that object is. And if you remember our very first session, we talked about actually watching a ball helps children learn eye tracking that they need for reading. So actually being able to watch a ball is a hard task to start with. But then being able to get your body to follow that ball is also a hard task. But then being able to follow that ball and get your body into the right place at the right time, although for us, it seems quite simple. For children, it's very difficult. So we're going to be looking at how we develop object control, and we're going to look at quite a few objects. I have a pile of different pieces of equipment in my room. Some of them are specialist pieces of PE equipment. Some of them are just equipment that you would have at home, or inexpensive equipment. I have some lovely balls, which I will show you later. And I literally bought them in a supermarket party aisle where they had little bags of things that you might put in a party bag for children to take away from a party. So it doesn't have to be expensive, things that you have in the house. If you don't have a ball, a couple of pairs of socks rolled up together will give you a ball. Might not bounce, but it will give us things that we can use as a ball. I once did some work in Mozambique, and I went to visit a school, and it was a long way away from the city. And when I got to this school, it was literally a shack in a clearing, and these boys were playing football, having an absolutely fantastic time. And they didn't really have a ball. What they'd done was they'd taken some old newspaper, scrunched it up into a ball and wrapped it up in really thick sellotape. So it was quite heavy, but quite big, and they kept making it bigger every time. They had no expensive equipment, but the skills that they had and the enjoyment that they had from that was phenomenal. So it's not about buying special equipment. It's just about letting your children experiment and see what they can do with it. So we're going to start off with, in object control, with something that is very cheap. You can use easily with children, a balloon. Now then, you might have children who are a little bit frightened of a balloon. This is where my lovely little treat that I bought in the party aisle comes in. This here is a cover for a balloon. So you take this cover, and it has a hole at one end. You insert your balloon and blow it up into there. So when the balloon blows up, it has a cover on. So if children don't want to touch a balloon, there's a cover around it. And it also means if it pops, you haven't got bits of balloon everywhere. I also have a fabric version of that. This was a lot more expensive. But if any of you are good with a needle and thread, all it is a, as I say, circle cover that you can put a balloon in, so that's a different experience for a child touching it. So let's have a play and look at just what we might be able to do with a balloon for children. So I think one of the favorite games for children is what I might call balloon keepy uppy. So it's just literally, can you keep a balloon up? And then we might be saying, can you let it drop and catch it before it hits the floor? Remember when I said last week, those two important words, can you? Because it doesn't matter if they can't. So it's just about playing. Often when they first start doing this, children will just use their hands. They might only use their dominant hand. So you might be saying to them, can you use both hands? But then you might say to them, can you keep the balloon up without using your hands? So now they have to use their imagination as well. So it might be they use their heads, or their knees, or their feet, the other foot, their chest, their foot. So they're experimenting using lots of different parts of their body to keep up the balloon. A balloon is a lovely object to start with because it moves very slowly through the air. So it gives the children a lot of time to make decisions about where they need to go to be able to catch the balloon or strike it like I was doing, keeping it up in the air. What we can also do is then ask them to sit on the floor and keep the balloon up. Just need to move that screen slightly. So if they're sitting on the floor to keep the balloon up, so again, we can start with just the hands, but then we might use a foot. What we could then do, and this builds in nicely from our first session, to build up core stability, we could ask children, and you could play this with them, we could ask children to lift their feet off the floor. So when their feet are off the floor, and try and keep it up. So then we start having a lot more moving around. You can also play this over a net or a table. And by a net, I don't mean some sort of fancy tennis net. It could be a piece of string tied between two dining chairs. One person on one side, on the other, passing it backwards and forwards. Or even without a net, two people sitting opposite each other, passing the balloon. Now, what tends to happen then is that the balloons, the person who's receiving the balloon has no control over how it's sent. So it might be that the balloon comes over quite far and they have to go back to pick it up and then get back up again. If they do that all the time, whilst keeping their feet off the ground, they're learning about object control as well as getting a good, strong core muscle. So many different things you can do with a balloon. What I also do, and unfortunately didn't have one today, they can learn to keep up the balloon with another object. So it might be, I'm going to use a pen, but what I tend to use, because this is very small for children, what I tend to use with children is the inside of a kitchen roll. So if they can actually then keep the balloon up using something else, they're learning again about striking with another object. As I say, a pen isn't a good example, but a kitchen roll certainly is. So they're learning to keep that up. If you've got more than one child at home, or if you want to play, they can have little tournaments, or they can have competitions of how many times can they keep the balloon up in 30 seconds. Can they hit the balloon backwards and forwards to each other with the kitchen roll stick, like a game of tennis? How many times can they do that without the balloon hitting the ground? So you can create lots of different challenges, but to be honest, the children will create their own. And this is what I said in one of our earlier sessions about children having the time to play outside, be creative, have unstructured games. So almost just giving them a balloon and saying, what games can you make up with that? They'll come up with lots of different things. Another one that's very good to use when you're striking is a paper plate. And I'll talk about that when we come to striking, where we might use a racket, how effective a paper plate might be instead of a racket. Another very inexpensive activity which children absolutely love, bubbles. So let's look at what we can do with bubbles. So first of all, I hope you can see these, because these are quite a small set of bubbles. So the bubbles come down, and there's things like, first of all, with little ones, can you pop the bubbles? You'll have done that with lots of children. So they're just moving around, trying to pop bubbles. But then we might say things like, we might blow the balloons up high, the bubbles, sorry, and then say to them, can you jump up and pop a balloon? Can you catch the bubble? So they're jumping up high to actually get it. So you're going to blow it up really high, ask the children to bend their knees, jump up, clap, and pop a bubble. We might also, when we talked last week about crossing the midline, we could say, okay then, you can only pop the bubbles with the hand that has a coloured dot. So you might just put a little, one of those sticky dots on, or you might just put a little felt tip dot on, and then say that's the only hand you can pop the bubbles with. So if I can only pop the bubbles with my right hand, and the bubbles are coming on my left hand, then I'm forced to cross my body, cross the midline to actually pop them. What you can also do to challenge the children is ask them to stand on a piece of paper. So they're standing on a big piece of paper, might be a piece of newspaper, and they've got to keep their feet on that newspaper and pop the bubbles. So if the bubbles are there, then I've got to try and pop them without moving my feet, which is a real challenge for some of them. So again, bubbles, balloons, really, really easy thing to do. Let's move on to passing and throwing. Well, I'm going to show you quite a few different objects. So let's have a look. We've got, as I said, the balloon. Balloon, again, when it comes, oh, it's blown away. When it comes to passing and throwing, a balloon is a lovely one to actually be able to hands up, catch it, pull it in, because it gives me so much time to see what's going on in the air. Things like, now these are called juggling scarves, but I know that I did a lot of work in India, and one teacher said to me, I showed her these scarves, and she said, after the session, she'd gone to the local sari shop and asked them if they had any cut off bits of fine fabric that was left over from making some of the beautiful dresses. And what she ended up with some beautiful colours sparkling, and the children absolutely loved playing with these. So if you watch this, again, you'll see it's very like the balloon. I'll just show you. I might scrunch it up, throw it up in the air. You see how slowly that comes down? I'll show you again. So we can throw it up, opens up, comes down slowly. Again, very slowly. So as a child, I've got time to think about where am I putting my hand, getting my hand in the right place. And because it's a big piece of fabric, I might just grab a small piece of it, but I've managed to get a hold of it and keep a hold of it. Other things like that, and I'm getting into more specialized equipment, but it might be that you might see some of these and think your children might enjoy them and have fun. This again, for catching, the idea is it takes a long time to come down, and I didn't catch it. It takes a long time to come down, and the children have a lot to grab onto. If they don't manage to grab the hoop, they can manage to grab onto the ribbon. These are lovely. Well, you can imagine children like to make shapes with them. If I make a big shape like that, I'm crossing the midline. Going back to some of the activities we did in the first place, and we might do these next week, talking to children about make a circle. So we're teaching them about shape, and they're making the circle with a big piece of equipment. A variety of different balls. And we've got a little bit about this next week, about when you're looking at how you include all children. What we need to be looking at is different sizes, different weights. So if you have, for example, a basketball with your child, you know how big they are, but also how heavy they are. So if a child tries to catch a basketball, misses it, and it hits them in the face, they aren't going to be really keen on trying to play with a basketball again. So what we've got to be looking at is lots of different pieces of equipment to make things easy for children. Here's another bigger ball. It's bigger, but it's quite light. Another one, which you probably have in abundance, beach balls. These are nice ones. So these, moving on from a balloon, they don't move quite as slowly as a balloon, but they still move slowly, and they're big that children can grab hold of. I particularly like this one because young children in the curriculum, in the UK curriculum anyway, from up to age 7, they learn about continents and oceans. And this is a nice beach ball in that they can catch it, and then you can say, oh, where are your hands? So if we look at my hands here, one of them is on North America, and one of them is in the Indian Ocean. So children start to learn about continents and oceans, but all we're really doing is practicing their throwing and catching. So again, we're going to do lots of different tasks that will look at, can you do this? Can you do that? So let's look at, that one bounces a little bit. So let's have things like, can you throw it in the air with one hand? Just want to bring my piece of paper. So one hand. Can they throw it with one hand? Remember, with any piece of equipment, your child might be using a balloon, but they're still learning that object control. So with one hand, with two hands. Can you do it with the other hand? Like we said last week, if you want to be physically literate, we need to get children to use both sides of the body. If you have anyone, child or husband or yourself who's interested in football, how many times have you watched a player who's got in front of the goal and has just taken one pass too many because they've wanted to swap it onto their dominant foot? And you find yourself screaming at the television screen, if only you had a left foot. And actually, that's what we want to do with our children. They will have a dominant foot, but we want them to be able to do things on both feet, with both hands. So that our catching, one hand, two hands, the other hand, from hand to hand. So it's always can you. And we start off standing still, because that's easier. If they've got to start worrying about moving around, then that becomes more complicated. So once they get better at that, then we might say, can you go forwards? Can you throw it backwards? Again, this is going with, remember last week, we talked about what you do. So this would be throwing and catching, how you do it, things like hard, soft, gently, jerkily, where you do it, high, low, forwards, backwards, and who or what you do it with. So do you throw it to a partner? Do you throw it at a wall? So all we're doing is applying the same, those three principles, exactly the same about the space, the how, and the relationships. We're doing that exactly the same with object control. So hand to hand, forwards, backwards, to the side, to the other side. So just practicing different ways. Can you throw it up high? Can't throw it up too high in this room. Can you throw it down low? So up high, down low. Can you throw it high and catch it low? And some of these I'm just making up as I go along, which you can. Lots of different things. It's just, can you do that? Can you do this? Because sometimes in a game of netball, volleyball, somebody might have to get down low to get a ball, to flick it back up again, or to catch it. And what we're doing is helping them learn those skills before they're in a big game and they can't do them. Can we bounce it? Bounce and catch a ball. This isn't the bounciest ball in the world. But sometimes some of the balls that children have bounced so far, it's really difficult for them. So it's about having a go, even in the supermarket aisle, have a go, see how bouncy the ball is. So can you bounce it and catch it? Can you throw it up? See how many times you can clap before you catch it. And if you look, just a quick change, if I count with this ball, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just about 5. If I throw a balloon up, 9 times. So you can see how much more time it gives the child to make that decision when they're practicing and learning. Okay, and then we might move on to, can you do it sitting down? Kneeling down. So they're experimenting with all the different ways they can pass and throw a ball. We then might go on to, and it's more difficult without a partner, so we might go, can you throw underarm? Can you throw overarm? Why I suddenly seem to have lost that screen. Can you still all see me? Yeah. I forgot to say actually at the beginning, please ask any questions, any comments, put them in chat. Oh, here we have, yeah, you can see me. Thanks, Hara. I thought I'd disappeared. Okay, so we've done the throwing one side to the other. We've done it sitting down. We can do it passing it along the ground to a partner, so rolling, to a partner who's far away, to a partner who's close to us. Because actually getting children to just have an experiment, so saying things like, can you throw that ball as far as you can? Often children will all just on their own turn around and do a sideways throw rather than an underarm throw. So all we're asking them to do is experiment and try and do some different things. Can you throw it against a wall to make a really loud noise? So that often changes the technique as well. So they're learning to throw underarm and overarm. I think that some of it is around letting them explore, especially when they're younger. We don't need to be saying, can you put your foot there and this hand there and this is where this goes. What we can be doing is just saying, have a go, letting them experiment and then saying, have you thought about, would you like to try? So just letting them explore and giving them a few pointers, because very young for children, if we start saying things like, stand with this foot forward, do this, stand there, you have to bend like this. Actually, children get a bit turned off from movement because what they want to have is fun. So we need to be very careful about how specialized we go. And sometimes when we have coaches who are working with a specific sport, they can get really bogged down with the technique. But in general terms, what we want is children to enjoy moving and playing and becoming physically literate. We don't want children who are so stressed about getting it wrong that they turn around and say to you later on, I don't want to go back to football, or I don't want to go back to rugby. I had an interesting experience with my grandchild. I think I've told you about my experience with him with his karate class. And he goes to a football club, the Juventus club in Dubai. And I went to watch him, and he was 4 and he was in a tournament. And they hadn't been, not as many of the 4-year-olds had gone along to take part in this tournament as the coaches had hoped. So they put the group together. So they put the 4-year-olds in, mixed them all in with some 7- and 8-year-olds as well. Now the difference in development physically from a 4-year-old to an 8-year-old and the skill development was huge. So what started to happen was the 8-year-olds who really wanted to win started to get very frustrated, even down to the point of taking the ball off some of the 4-year-olds who were still on their team. And I could see the younger ones getting sadder and sadder about not being able to play this and, you know, not being part of the team. And children are clever. They pick up very, very quickly if someone's being mean to them or if they think they can't do something. And if we remember about the definition of physical literacy, it's about confidence. So we need to be making sure that we give children the right steps, and it's all about enjoyment, that we're not making them stressed or worried about what they can and they can't do. So we've had a little look at passing and throwing. Let's have a look at rolling, and rolling is a really nice one. And you can do lots of activities with rolling just in the house. So again, choose the size of ball that you want to use. So I might have, because I have it handy, I have the box from my globe. So I could put it on the floor. And I can try and roll my ball to knock over my target. You can have all sorts of fun at home with children with targets. They can make their own out of small liter drinks bottles. Once they're finished, you can put a little bit of sand in or a little bit of water just to make them stable. And they can aim at the targets. They can actually make obstacle courses at home. So I might have a box or a bottle as a target, but I might put a chair in front of it and I have to roll under the chair's legs to actually hit the target. So I'm going to roll it and knock over the target. As I say, you can make anything a target. Children might make some targets with their construction toys. They could build a Duplo or a Lego tower and roll that over. So looking at lots of different ways of rolling. And it's things like, again, saying to them, can you roll the ball to a partner? Can you roll it through a target? Can you roll it through 2 cones, to a hoop, at a skittle, at another ball? What's quite a nice one you can do with children once they get the timing is, if you have a bigger ball and you stand at one side and you roll the big ball across and say to the children, can you hit my ball when it's moving? So they've got to make decisions about how and when to roll their ball to actually make it intercept and hit your ball. For older children, if there's a few of them, there's a brilliant game called Target Ball. And what you can do with that one is have something like the big beach ball in the middle and give the children smaller balls. So you have 2 teams, big beach ball in the middle, 2 teams on either side. And the children have to roll their balls or throw a beanbag or something at the big ball. And the idea is to try and get the big ball over the other team's line. Children absolutely love that game. So another nice one to think about. How we're doing for time. Okay. Then we might do things like striking a ball. Now, striking a ball, we talked about striking the balloon before, keeping it up, just hitting it and letting it drop. So there's things like, let's see if we can say, let's strike the ball with a hand with a bouncing ball. So this might be, can we bounce the ball with both hands? Can we bounce the ball with 2 hands? Bounce it and catch it, bounce it and catch it. Sometimes for children, bouncing and catching is a better starting point than that ability to keep bouncing, because that's hard. Don't know whether this one bounces any better, yes. So can they then bounce with one hand? Ideally to the side, and then be able to walk. But then it's all about just trying to challenge them in different ways. Can you bounce the ball continuously in a stationary position? Can you bounce it with one hand? Can you change it to the other hand? Can you bounce it and vary the height? So can you bounce it high? Can you bounce it low? Can you bounce it through your legs? Front to back, back to front. Can you bounce it while jogging and running? So again, just letting them experiment and play and giving them lots of different questions about how they can do something. Kicking. Kicking's another one. A lot of children enjoy kicking a ball around. And again, we can start looking at, if you have a garden or a park outside, putting some objects that the children have to kick towards. So again, I use those cones, but you can use paper plates, are fantastic for this. So you could make a line. Obviously, I've got restricted space here, but you could make a line. So many, let's imagine these cones were a few meters apart outside, and then give the child a ball and say, can you kick the ball? Can you kick a ball to land in each one of those zones? So they might kick it, and I'm not going to do it here because there's not enough room, but kick to go into one area, kick to get into the next area or the next area. Again, if you have those targets that we talked about before with the bottles, they can kick towards the bottles as well. So it's about being as creative as possible. The children can make their own. If there's a few of them out in the park, chairs, hoops, anything, paper, as I say, paper plates, anything that you have, you can make a difference with that. Striking with an implement, we talked a little bit about a stick. A lot of children, including my grandchild that I talked about before, are really interested in playing tennis. And he was interesting. The last time I went to Dubai, he'd been given a tennis racket. The only problem is, if you think about crossing the midline and you give a child a tennis racket. So if I think, I'm going this way, if I'm crossing the midline, we said anything, the further away it gets from your body, the harder it is. So if I think I then stick a tennis racket into that hand, that is a long way away from the middle of my body. So it becomes difficult for me to handle. So if we're going to teach children about striking, the best thing to do in a sort of game of tennis, first of all, even if we have the net, so it starts feeling like a big game of tennis, as the ball comes over the net, the ball bounces, and first of all, the child just has to catch it. So they get used to using that space of getting, as I said before, timing is very difficult, getting into the right place at the right time to actually let the ball bounce, then catch it. Then we might further develop that activity into a striking game, but this time they're using their hand to strike the ball. So we still haven't got a tennis racket, but we're building up all the skills that we need to be able to play tennis. So the ball comes over, they strike the ball with a hand, again it bounces, so if it's coming the other way, it bounces, then they strike it again with their hand. Then what I might think of progressing it to is holding a paper plate in their hand. So let's imagine, I know this isn't a paper plate, but if they had their hand behind a paper plate, so their thumb is holding onto the back, the front of the plate, the hand is on the inside, there, and they start hitting it. Sorry, you need to move so you can see me. They start hitting it, it's the opposite way around. They start hitting it with the plate. So again, what we're doing is keeping the control closer to the midline. Once they get good at being able to strike something with a paper plate, quite confidently and moving their feet to get into the right place to actually be able to strike that back, then we might introduce a tennis racket. But the best tennis rackets to introduce with little ones have got big faces and very short handles. So have a look for those sort of bats, short handles, big faces, because what we're trying to do is give children the opportunity to succeed. So again, it's things like playing games. Again, once they get a racket, it's things like put the racket down, pick up your racket, balance the ball on one side of the racket, balance the ball on the other side of the racket. Can you throw the ball up, let it drop, catch it on your racket. So all you're doing is lots and lots of games that get a child used to being able to use an implement. Because what my grandson wanted to do was pick up a tennis ball, a tennis racket, and be able to play. And he ended up getting really frustrated because he couldn't hit it with the tennis racket. And of course, when his grandma suggested that he might put the tennis racket down and we could have learned a few of the steps that he needed beforehand, not a chance. He ended up throwing the tennis racket away in frustration, crying, and didn't want to play tennis again. So it's about, if we want to help children become physically literate, let's look at the activity that we want them to play, and then let's look at what they need to be able to do to play that game. So if we think of tennis, they need the locomotion skills to get from one place to another. They need the visual tracking skills to be able to watch a ball. They need the object control skills to be able to get their hand in the right place to hit the ball back. So there's a huge amount of things they need before they can get anywhere near tennis. So in future, from my point of view, what I would like you to think about is, what do you have to do to play this game? How can I help my child have the physical literacy to be able to play this game before they start trying and getting disappointed? Okay, so that's us having gone through physical literacy. What I've got now is, because these sessions were for children with special needs. So what I've done, as part of the handouts for this session, and I'm just going to show you them, I've got a little bit of a physical literacy assessment tool, and I'm just going to talk you through how you would use it. Now, this isn't a medical test or anything. All this is giving you some ideas of the areas in which your child needs help. So it's not as if it's a test that has to be administered very carefully. You can encourage your child, you can explain how to do things, you can demonstrate how to do them. All it is for you to then be able to say, well, actually, my child is really good at locomotion. He can move his body around, he can get from one place to another, he can skip, he can crawl, he can jump. But actually, when it comes to catching a ball, he's struggling. So you then go, well, in the future, what I need to do if we're out playing, I need to do a little bit more of throwing and catching type games. So it'll give you a little idea of those things to do. So as I say, it's nothing to be stressed or worried about. It's just something for you to have a go through and have a go with your children. And it's literally, even if you sort of said, well, he needs a little bit of help with catching, and I'm going to do 10 minutes of activity every day, just some fun catching games, it said with lots of different bits of equipment. What it shouldn't be is a chore. So it might be that one of your catching games is with bubbles, or with a balloon, or with a scarf, or with a new ball that your child's just picked themselves. Again, picking things that are around their ability. Don't pick something big, heavy and hard. Because often what children do when they're learning to catch and they're a bit frightened, and you might see this with your child, and we'll talk about it during the test, is they go to catch the ball, but they are so frightened with it, they actually turn their heads to one side. And if it's a big, heavy ball, it might come and hit them. And as I said, they don't want to do it. So let's have a look at some of these. So the first one that we're looking at is called a commando crawl. And this is just a way of crawling. So what you would say to your child is, can you lie on your tummy? It could be on a mat, could it be on the carpet, could be on some dry grass. And can you use your arms and legs to move yourself along to the end? And the idea is that they have to try and keep their tummies on the mats. I'm going to show you, which is probably a very dodgy demonstration. Commando crawling is actually quite hard to do. So the idea is that they lie on their tummies and they try and get, I've got a little yoga mat here, they try and get from one end of the mat to the other, but they've got to try and keep their tummies on the floor. And what a commando crawl really is one knee goes up and the opposite arm, and they pull along. And the other arm goes out with the opposite arm and they push along. Now, often children might not be able to do that, so they'll get up off to their tummy, or they might be able to do it with one knee and push, but they're not very good on the other knee. So what you would do then is, there's a little box for comments, and you would write down, really good with the right knee, struggling a bit with the left knee. So it just gives you a bit of an idea of how this might work. The next one is 2 foot along jumping. So what you might do is draw a line along the ground, or have a skipping rope. And what you're actually saying to the children is, can you jump keeping your 2 feet together all along the line? I've given you a little hint in this column about what you're looking for. So we're looking for them being able to keep their 2 feet together. We're looking for them being able to use their arms effectively. So if I thought I was jumping along a line, I'm not trying to jump a long way, I'm just jumping along a line, so I might use my arms a little bit. If I'm using my arms weirdly all over the place, then they're excessive arm movements and they're probably not coordinated in helping me move. We need to land with a nice soft knees, not on straight legs, because they'll get a jar all the way through their body. So if you ask them to jump along the line, then you count how many jumps they can actually do along the line successfully. Then using the same line, can they walk along a line carefully without stepping off? Now, the interesting thing with this is often children who are struggling with their movements will do something fast. So you might say, can you walk along that line? And they'll go along it really, really quickly. But what you need to do is ask them if they can go along it slowly. And then watch them very carefully. Are they looking down exactly to see where their feet are? Or are they able to walk along knowing where their feet are? Do they use their arms for balance? Are they swaying everywhere? Or are they just gently using them for balance and walking along quite fluently. As I say, not too fast or using big steps. We want quite small steps. So having a look to see if they can do that. And you count the steps. How many accurate steps can they make before they step off? If they step off, you start again from 1. Again, as I say, it's no pressure for the children. This should be fun. And we're going to be encouraging them all along. Next one is skipping. Can the children skip? Do they know how to skip? Now, I don't mean skipping with a rope here. I need skipping like you might skip along to a song, being able to skip like that. Skipping's quite a difficult skill because it's a rhythmical skill. You almost have to have a tune in your head to be able to skip properly. So looking at coordinating the top and the bottom of the body, sometimes some children can do it on one side and not the other. So you end up with a bit of a skippy limp. So again, looking at that. But as I said, skipping is actually a difficult skill. So don't be worrying if you look and you think, oh, I'm not sure my child can skip. But if we go from that developmental idea, to be able to skip, they need to be able to hop. Because the skip is a hop on one leg and then a hop on the other leg. So hopping with alternate legs. I once worked in a school with a little boy and I said to him, can you skip? And he said, no. And we were going to do a skipping activity. I said, well, can you hop? And he said, yes. I said, can you hop on both legs? And he said, yes. So I said, okay, then you just do that. Hop on one leg, then hop on the other. So a minute later, he goes past me skipping beautifully. And I said, oh, that's fantastic skipping. And he said, I'm not skipping. I'm hopping on one leg and then the other one. So that's what skipping is. But to be able to skip, as I say, you need to be able to hop. But to be able to hop, you need to be able to stand on one leg. So these are all prerequisites that children need to be able to develop those. Walking along a bench. Now on here, on our, oh, can't find it in there. Maybe it's missing from there. I'll have to check. Okay, let's have a look at standing on one leg. So we're looking at stability. So again, saying to the children, can you stand on one leg, keeping very still for as long as you can? So you just watch, how are they doing it? And in this questionnaire, you have things like can't do and can do, but the can't do is not close, and then a nearly. So let's see, if we said, can you stand on one leg, and a child is literally doing this, they can't. So you would put a cross in the not close. When it gets to the next one, nearly, there's a little bit, but they're not quite there. They might have to be using arms all over the place to help them. The next one is if they get to here, they can just do, they're doing a bit of balance, but there's still a lot. So you can say, yes, they are standing on one leg, but there's all sorts of extra things going on. This one, can you stand on one leg? Yes, they can. So it's about you having a look at where they are and being able to tick that box. Next one is a log roll, and we talked about the log roll in one of the activities that we did in locomotion and stability. So with that, all they have to do is be able to lie flat on a mat. Can you see me here? Lie down, long thin shape, legs together, and roll onto the other part of their body, keeping their tummies tight, their legs tight, arms tight. Do they get up and say they feel dizzy? Have a look at how they do that. Okay. Again, we go on to, I think I've got some of these muddled up. Right. So we've got also things like catching with two hands. Do they use both hands? Can they clearly track a beanbag? A beanbag is quite a nice one for children to catch. Can be a beanbag, which is very easy to make. I have some different ones here. So this beanbag is just a little pocket. You could put lentils, rice in it. It's nice because if the child doesn't catch it, and this is for me a very important one, if somebody throws a beanbag to the child and they don't catch it, I'm just going to try and clear the floor so you can see, the beanbag stays where it is on the floor. Often when you get a child who's not very good at catching, if they miss it, the ball carries on rolling, and a child who's not very good at catching spends all his time trying to retrieve a rolling ball. So something that doesn't roll when it hits the ground is very good. This is called a couche. This is also a nice one that doesn't roll when it hits the ground. You can also get beanbags like shaped like lots of different animals, which children love, but you don't need them. A bag of rice or lentils will work just as well. Please fire in any questions. I realise we haven't got a lot of time left. So any questions in that chat box would be fantastic. Another one on there, aiming with a beanbag into a target. So it might be you have a hoop and it's about being able to throw consistently. This time they might choose their preferred hand and they're controlling the trajectory of it. So one of the important things about when children learn target games is that if they throw it the first time, we want them to look and think, right, I missed because I threw it too hard or I let go of it too high. So they're making decisions and adjusting what they do for the next throw as what happened from the first one. And you can see children learning to do that. At first, they just keep throwing and not making any adjustments. But as they get better and the decision making gets better, they start understanding that maybe they've thrown it too hard or too heavy. So looking at that one. Sending and receiving. With this one, it's like a football game, trap and kick a ball. Now, sometimes what happens is that when you first ask a child, you roll a ball towards a child and ask a child to stop the ball, in general, they will stop it with their hands. And it's only as they get more developed and more used to timing and following a moving ball, and they get that eye-foot connection, that they're able to put their foot on the ball and stop it. This is what this task looks like. Can they follow a ball with their eye, put their foot on top of it, stop it, and then kick it again? So it's looking at those. And again, this one will be with both feet. Can they bounce the next one? Can they bounce a ball and walk? Can you bounce a ball and walk along a line? Can you bounce it and catch it while you walk along a line? And it's around, can they get that sequence? Can they maintain the right force on the ball? So the ball is coming up to the side, so they can very nicely just keep control of it and walk along without thinking about it. If they're bouncing a ball and it's flying off all over the place and they haven't got the right force every time, then you might be saying, well, they can just do it or nearly do it, or really they're not close to being able to do this task successfully. Another one, the object control, dribble through cones. So it might be that they've got a line of cones and you're asking them to dribble through the cones. And it's about looking carefully at which parts of the feet they use. Do they only use one foot? Do they use both feet? Are they able to dribble effectively around the cones? Because sometimes children sort of kick the ball and it goes off miles and they have to bring it back, bring it to the cone and go around again. So it's having a look at that to see if they can manage it without any prompts. Striking the ball, can you hit a ball with a bat? Again, it's about eye-hand coordination. It's about being able to anticipate the direction that it's coming from and being able to move your body to get into the right place to be able to hit it effectively. So lots of things to look at like that. So I think that gives you an idea of what the that little battery of tests looks like. So it might be in your comments, you might write, say for the commando crawl, they look a bit weak and his arms looked a bit weak. Jumps, the jumping in a line might be they used a lot of their arm movements. The steps along the line, you might say, well, he did 10 steps, but they were too fast to be accurate. So just, it's about you looking really carefully. But I said it at the start, and this for me is the most important thing. As a parent, what you need to be doing is having fun with your children. As a child, as a parent of a child with special needs, it might be, again, 100%. You're enjoying, having fun with them, working out what they can and can do, asking them what they can do, not as a parent deciding what they can't do. So often, you know, saying, do you think, let's have a try at this, can you do this? Encourage them, not deciding straight away that they can't. But it's also about you being able to look at what they can do well and the areas in which they need help. Because sometimes some of these little activities, so it might be that you identify from your little test that you think your child needs a little bit of help with locomotion, different ways of moving. Well, last week we did lots of different ways of moving, and I'm sure once you start doing them, you'll come up with lots of different ways of moving yourself for your children to do and just have fun. So you'll do some of those, and often once you've got a focus on thinking, right, actually I need to do a little bit more on that, you can really make a difference to children's movement and certainly to their enjoyment and their feeling of confidence and competence. Because so you know, for me, it's about giving my child the competence to be able to go out there and have fun with their friends and join in. Okay. 4 minutes left for any questions, please. Any questions or any comments you want to say in that chat box, please. No questions yet. Who's going to be brave and ask the first question or make the first comment? That's good to know. And I'm enjoying working with you, although I can't see everyone. I'm glad you're enjoying it. Next. Okay, good. Thank you. So next week, what we'll be looking at is how we can incorporate some physical activity and help us with our academic learning. So how can we put a little bit of physical activity into maths, into English, into Arabic, whatever it, you know, you can adapt these little games and activities that I show you next week, and you'll get a lot of different handouts that you can actually work with your children just to have a go with these. So, you know, by all means, you've got that little test battery, you've got all the object control things. Please have a go with all of the activities on the handouts with the physical literacy. And if you want to have a go at having a little try with the test and you want to ask any questions next week, please feel free. So thank you very much, everyone. And unless there's any more, I'm still here for a couple of minutes. Any more comments or questions? And if not, I'll see you all next week.